Hello and welcome to Mr. Carter's Science Specials. This is our second video where we are looking at the Edexcel GCSE Biology and Double Science specifications, and we'll be looking at the second section of the syllabus called B2 Structure and Function of Living Things. This is a very large section of the syllabus, so we'll be breaking it down into smaller chunks for us to digest easily. This first section we'll be looking at cells, differentiation and specialized cells. As always, just some handy tips. Please make certain you listen carefully, pause the video often, write some notes to make certain that you're learning effectively, and attempt to over-review questions before jumping ahead to see the answers. As always, each section of the video will have a slide like this where we are looking at the different specifications from your syllabus. So I'll start with a very simple basic question. What are houses made out of? Well, you might suggest the main thing that they're made out of are these orange bricks. Houses are made out of bricks. What's the relevance of that when we're talking about cells? Well, if a house is made out of bricks, a living organism is made out of cells. So what is a cell? Well, a cell is the basic unit of life. And if we take a group of similar cells with a similar function and put them together, this is a tissue. This particular definition here is very, very important. It's often asked in exam questions, so please make certain you memorize it. A tissue is a group of similar cells with a similar function. An organ is a group of tissues with a similar function. For example, the heart, the lungs, the eyes, they are all made up of different tissues with similar functions. But don't forget, plants also have tissues and organs. So an example of an organ in a plant would be a leaf or roots. We also then have an extra level of organisation above this called the organ system. And an organ system is a group of organs with a similar function. Try this question below, write the answer in your notes. So let's take a look at some animal and plant cells. Now at Key Stage 3 you will have come across these three terms: the cytoplasm, the nucleus and the cell membrane, and both plants and animal cells have these features. Plant cells also have three extra features: the cell wall, chloroplasts, and we've got a zoomed in chloroplast there, and a large vacuole. And at Key Stage 3 in Year 7 you will have only had to memorise these 6 parts of a cell. These 6 parts of a cell are known as organelles. However, at GCSE there are 2 extra parts you need to be aware of. We also need to consider the mitochondria and the ribosomes. On this diagram you'll notice that there's a large number of other organelles that we are not going to discuss as part of your GCSE course, but those of you considering moving on to A-level biology may well be interested to look up their functions. So what are the functions of each of these organelles? Well, I've listed them all here. The nucleus contains DNA, and that DNA is a code to decide which proteins are made. And the nucleus will control the function of the cell. Very important that you learn that definition. No other definition will be accepted. Some people have remembered from Year 7, teachers often refer to a nucleus being the brain of a cell. This is clearly not true at all, so please do not use that. The nucleus controls the function of the cell, it contains DNA, and it's a code to decide which proteins are made. The cell membrane controls which substances enter and leave the cell. Cytoplasm is the site of chemical reactions in a cell. The ribosomes. Ribosomes are where protein synthesis occurs. And the mitochondria are the site of respiration. So you'll often come across diagrams on the internet that look a little bit like the two we've got here. And these are slightly older diagrams, they haven't really been updated for the new specifications yet. So we would need to add on a few things. For example, if we put in lots and lots and lots of little dots in the cytoplasm of both plant cells and animal cells, those little dots will be the ribosomes. And if we add in some small oval shapes with a couple of little dashes in their lines, these small oval shapes, and again these will be in both plant and animal cells, these small oval shapes are called the mitochondria. And this is the site of that very, very, very important chemical reaction, respiration. So both plant cells and animal cells will have all of those 5 different organelles we've just discussed: the nucleus, the cytoplasm, the cell membrane, the ribosomes and the mitochondria. However, plant cells also have an extra 3 organelles that you need to be aware of, and that is the chloroplast, the large vacuole and the cell wall. So the chloroplast, they are here, and the chloroplast contains a green pigment called chlorophyll. A green pigment is a word that means chemical with a colour. So chlorophyll is a chemical with a colour, and it's a green colour, so we call this a green pigment. And the function of chlorophyll is to absorb a light energy. And in fact, we've got that here. We can absorb some light energy, and we can use that light energy to combine carbon dioxide and water molecules together to make a molecule of glucose and some waste oxygen. And that chemical reaction is called photosynthesis, and it can only happen in chloroplasts. We also have a large vacuole which will store cell sap and sugars, and a cell wall, most importantly, as you'll remember from a classification video, made out of cellulose, and that provides a lot of strength to the cell. Plants, particularly trees, can grow incredibly tall, far taller than an animal could ever grow, because each individual cell has a cell wall providing strength. So let's try some review questions. We've got a couple of slides of these questions. Please pause the video, try each slide, and then we'll go through the answers. This is slide 1, and this is slide 2 of the review questions. Pause now. So let's look at the answers. List the following terms from the smallest to the largest. Well, the smallest is the cell, followed by tissues, organs, and then the system. Define the following terms. Well, the cell is the smallest unit of life. The tissue, and this one's so important I'll add some notes. A group of tissue is a group of similar cells with a similar function. Now, if you're uncertain of what that word function means, it means job. So a group of similar cells with a similar function or job. An organ is a group of similar tissues with a similar function. And a system is a group of similar organs with a similar function. So if you can remember this one definition for the tissue, you should be able to define both organs and systems. Name the organelles found in an animal cell. Well, we've only got 5 of those now. We've got the nucleus, we've got the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the 2 new ones, the mitochondria and the ribosomes. In a plant cell, we have 8. We've got the 5 from the animal cell, the nucleus, cell membrane, cytoplasm, mitochondria and ribosomes, and then we've got the extra 3 being the chloroplast, large vacuole, and the cell wall made out of cellulose. Draw and label a diagram of a plant cell and an animal cell. Please go back and look at the slides previously and make certain you've added the mitochondria and ribosomes. And state the function of each organelle. So the function of the nucleus is it contains DNA, and the DNA codes for proteins, and the nucleus controls the function of the cell. The cell membrane controls what enters and leaves the cell. The cytoplasm is the site of chemical reactions. The mitochondria is the site of respiration. The ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. Chloroplasts contain a green pigment called chlorophyll, and that's the site of photosynthesis. Cell walls contain cellulose, and they provide strength to the cell. And the large vacuole contains cell saps and sugars, and it's a storage of those. The three parts of a cell found both in plants and animal cells are, well, there's actually 5 now. So we could be looking at cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, or you could have the mitochondria and the ribosomes. 3 parts of a cell found only in plant cells: chloroplast, cell wall, and vacuole. The function of the cell membrane is to control what goes in and out of the cell, and the function of DNA and the nucleus is to control what the cell does. So now we're going to move on to look at a new keyword: differentiation, and how cells specialize. Again, we can look at the specifications and where we are in the syllabus. So what is differentiation? Well, all multicellular organisms begin life as a single fertilized cell called a zygote. This zygote divides by a process called mitosis to form a small ball of cells called an embryo. All the cells are clones and have genetically identical DNA and genes. This process, mitosis, we're going to come back and look at that in more detail when we look at inheritance. For now, all you need to know is it's how a cell divides. So when we look at an embryo, all the cells in an embryo are completely unspecialized, and they're a type of cell called a stem cell. So embryos are made out of stem cells, and stem cells have a special ability to develop into any specialized cell that you can think of. So a stem cell could develop into a liver cell, or a skin cell, or a neuron that's found in your brain, or a cell in the retina of your eye. Stem cells are absolutely amazing, and there's actually a lot of research going on into stem cells. In particular, we're interested in their applications in medicine. So how do we get a stem cell, an unspecialized cell? How do we get that unspecialized cell to become specialized? Well, that process is called differentiation, and it's the process of an unspecialized cell becoming specialized. This happens when different genes are switched on in different cells, and this takes different proteins that control different chemical reactions, so the cell begins to have different adaptations and different functions. That's quite amazing, because all the stem cells have got exactly the same DNA and exactly the same genes, but the difference is which genes are turned on and which genes are not turned on. Stem cells are cells that can divide to form new cells that can differentiate to form specialized cells. Now, this is quite interesting in plants, because plants have stem cells found in a region of their roots and their shoots known as the meristem. So if we look down here, this is the meristem of a plant root. And those cells in that meristem are completely undifferentiated. They are all embryonic, they are all unspecialized. So a meristem can produce any specialized cell throughout the entire life of a plant. This is often why you can take things like a garlic bulb and you can put it into some water and it'll continue to grow brand new roots, because it has stem cells that it can use throughout its life. Unlike animal cells. Now, animal cells do not have embryonic stem cells after the embryo stage. If you lose a limb, lose an arm or a leg, you cannot regrow them back, because we do not have the stem cells to allow that specialization and differentiation. But in animal cells, there are 2 types of stem cells, so we do have some. We've got the embryonic stem cells found in the embryo, and these stem cells can differentiate and form any cell when we're in the embryonic stage, and they'll eventually specialize to form all the different organs that you have. But we also have a different type of stem cell known as adult stem cells. And these are found in the organs and they produce a more limited range of specialised cells, which are needed for a particular organ to grow and repair its tissue. For example, in bone marrow, in that kind of tissue, they contain adult stem cells that can differentiate to form a very limited range of cells: the red blood cells, white blood cells, the lymphocytes and the phagocytes. Now this is very important because you need to replace your red blood cells about once every 4 months. You need to completely replace every single red blood cell in your body. And if you get ill, you certainly need to produce more lymphocytes and phagocytes than the white blood cells. So let's have a quick look at that. Here we have an adult stem cell found in the bone marrow, and it can specialise to become one of 4 different white blood cells, or red blood cells, or indeed platelets, which are important in the clotting process. So how can we use stem cells in medicine? Well, in medicine, adult stem cells have been successfully used to treat diseases, and research into the use of stem cells is at a very early stage though. We haven't got any processes which have been rolled out on a large scale yet. It's hoped that stem cells can be used to treat a range of diseases. Stem cells are usually harvested from fertility clinics, and therefore the use and the research into these stem cells is often very controversial. So here's a task I'd like you to do. Pause the video and spend half an hour and try and complete this task. Research the advantages and the disadvantages of using stem cells in medicine. I would like you to try and write at least half a page of that. See if you can find any examples. Why are they a good thing? Why is it a bad thing? What's the controversies around stem cell research? Pause the video now and I'll come back to you in a moment with the answers. So here are some case studies to help you with your research into stem cells. The first case study is about a bone marrow transplant that was carried out in the 1950s. And this is where healthy bone marrow from one twin was given to a second twin who had a blood disease and he couldn't produce red blood cells and white blood cells. The adult stem cells that were injected into the twin with the disease were able to divide and multiply and specialise and produce all the red blood cells and white blood cells that the twin needed in order to survive. A second case study is an example of some research that's in a very early stage, where we're taking either embryonic or adult stem cells and we're using them to treat diseases like diabetes or to possibly replace damaged cells in an adult. The stem cells are taken and then they're stimulated in a variety of ways to make them divide and produce specialised cells which can then be injected into the places that they're needed. One problem with all of this is that stem cells need to be a very close match to the patient's normal cells. Otherwise, the white blood cells will recognise the foreign antigens and recognise these cells as being foreign and begin an immune response to try and destroy them. This is called rejection. Stem cells that continue to divide after the injection into a patient may also cause cancer, and this is a problem. Cancer is uncontrolled cell division, and you might end up with a ball of cells which damage the tissue around them, creating disease. So what are the advantages? Well, adult stem cells can be used to treat diseases, as we've just discussed. Bone marrow transplants can help treat leukemia and cancers of the blood. And adult stem cells can be injected into the heart to possibly repair damaged tissue. Both clear advantages. Embryonic stem cells could be used to treat more diseases in the future. For example, Parkinson's disease, which is a disease of brain and nerve cells. However, there are several disadvantages. Embryonic stem cells are obtained largely from fertility clinics or IVF clinics, where the patients and parents have chosen to donate their unused embryos. Now, some people, for various ethical reasons and religious reasons, do not like research using embryos due to their moral concerns. Again, this is a big disadvantage. So let's take a look at a few review questions. Again, pause the video, try these out, and I'll give you the answers on the next slide. So let's look at some of the answers. Define the terms zygote and embryo. Well, a zygote is the cell that is formed after fertilization, when a sperm and an egg cell, when the nucleus from each of those two cells fuses together. And an embryo is a ball of unspecialized stem cells. What is a stem cell? Well, a stem cell is a cell that is unspecialized. It has not yet differentiated and it does not have an adaptation and a particular function. Explain how differentiation occurs. Well, differentiation occurs when different genes in different cells are switched on or off to allow the cell to adapt to different functions. Compare and contrast stem cells in animals and plants. Plants have stem cells throughout their life and they can specialize at any point to produce specialized and adapted plant cells, whereas an animal will only have stem cells that can specialize into any animal cell in the embryo, and animals can have adult stem cells, but they will only differentiate into a limited range of cells. So compare and contrast embryo stem cells and adult stem cells. Well, the embryo stem cells, again in an animal, these are stem cells that can fully differentiate. They can differentiate into any of the 206 different cells in a human body. But adult stem cells, these can differentiate, but only into a much more limited range of cells. Describe several possible uses of stem cells in medicine. Well, we might have them in treating cancers like leukemia, where we could have a bone marrow transplant, or perhaps we could inject them directly into a damaged organ, for example a heart, or we could try and allow the cells to specialize in the laboratory by using various technology to switch on and off genes. Those specialized cells could then be injected directly into damaged organs to treat disease. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using stem cells to treat diseases. Well, the main advantage is that you can treat a range of diseases, but the big disadvantage is that you need to make certain that your stem cells are a close match for a patient to avoid rejection. Another disadvantage is that when researching on stem cells, the stem cells tend to come from fertility clinics and people have moral, ethical and religious objections to using those stem cells. Another disadvantage is also that stem cells may continue to divide once in the body and cause cancers. So, differentiation and specialized cells. What is differentiation? As we've just discussed, that's adapting and switching on a variety of different genes so that you can become adapted to the function. So we have a range of cells here that are adapted to different functions, and we're going to go through a range of different cells on the next slides, and we're going to go through them one by one and explain how they are differentiated to their function, and also how you can make certain you score the maximum marks in an exam if they ever ask for a particular cell, a specialized cell, and its adaptations to the function. So the first cell we'll look at are red blood cells, and they are adapted because they have no nucleus and therefore they have no DNA at all. That means that they have a large amount of room to carry this particular protein, hemoglobin, and hemoglobin carries oxygen around the body. So the more hemoglobin you have in your cell, the more oxygen your red blood cell can carry. Red blood cells also have a large surface area to volume ratio so that oxygen can diffuse in and out more quickly. Nerve cells. Nerve cells have long, thin axons. The axon is insulated by a layer of myelin sheath, and they help to carry electrical nerve impulses very quickly. The myelin sheath is very important to make certain that the speed of the electrical nerve impulse is maintained. Nerve cells also connect to muscle fibers and they can make muscles contract. They also have a range of these little parts here called dendrites, which will allow the nerve cell to connect to a range of other cells. In your trachea and in your windpipe, you have these two cells here, the ciliated epithelial cell and the goblet cell. The function of the goblet cell is to produce mucus, which will trap dirt and bacteria. However, once you've trapped the dirt and bacteria in the mucus, you need to get rid of the mucus out of your body. And that's the job of the ciliated epithelial cells, which have these tiny little cilia here. And the cilia's job is to waft and move the mucus up and out of the lungs into your mouth, where it can be swallowed into your stomach and digested by stomach acid and enzymes. The stomach acid will destroy any bacteria that happen to be present. Some more specialised cells that we have to consider in terms of animals are the gamete cells. These gametes are our sex cells involved in reproduction. We have the egg cell and the sperm cell. Both sperm and egg cells have one particular adaptation, that they have a haploid nucleus. Again, more on this when we get to the inheritance unit, but this means that they have half the normal number of chromosomes in their nucleus. Egg cells are the largest cell in the human body, and they contain a large amount of nutrients in the cytoplasm for the growing embryo. And the cell membrane is also highly adapted in that it will change after fertilization to prevent more than one sperm from entering. Sperm cells have also got a number of adaptations. Firstly, and most simply, they have a tail so that they can swim to the egg. They also have this area here, which I'll colour in red on our diagram. This area is the acrosome. Now, the acrosome contains enzymes which will help to digest the outer layer of an egg cell so that sperm can actually enter and fertilize the egg. In the middle piece of the sperm, they also have a large number of mitochondria to provide lots and lots of energy from respiration, and that energy is used for movement. Specialist white blood cells. So white blood cells can provide immunity and keep you safe from diseases by destroying microbes. There's two main types of white blood cell: phagocytes, which will surround and digest microbes, that's their function, and lymphocytes, which will produce antibodies, and those antibodies will destroy any bacteria that have entered your body. The antibodies will also stay in your body for a very long time, protecting you from a bacteria in the future, and that is known as immunity. A few other specialised cells that you may come across in an animal. We have fat cells, where the cytoplasm of a fat cell is filled with large droplets, and the fat is a reserve of energy and will only be used if the body truly needs it. We also have muscle cells, which in the cytoplasm contain special contracting proteins called actin and myosin that will allow a cell to shorten and contract or elongate and relax when necessary. But of course, plants also have specialised cells. The main two that you need to know in this particular unit are the root hair cell, which have a very large surface area, so they have a faster rate for absorbing water and minerals from the soil. They're also adapted because they do not have chloroplasts. There is no sunlight in the soil, so it is a waste of energy for the plant to have chloroplasts in the root hair cells. And then we also have palisade cells. Now these are the palisade cells here in this layer of tissue inside the leaf. This layer here. You may notice that a palisade cell is our classic diagram for a leaf cell. And palisades have many chloroplasts for photosynthesis so that they can absorb a large amount of sunlight and produce lots of carbohydrates and glucose in photosynthesis. So now that you've looked at a number of specialised cells, try this task. Use the previous slides to give examples of specialised animal and plant cells and explain how they are adapted to their functions. You need to know each and every one of those adaptations. They may well come up on your exam. Every single sentence on those slides is at least 1 mark. For example, the red blood cells, mentioning no nucleus is a mark, hemoglobin carrying oxygen is a mark, and the large surface area to volume ratio, again for carrying oxygen, is a mark. So you can have a maximum of up to 3 marks there for just one particular question. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Yes, again, please can you comment below to tell me whether you like the video or not, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.